Chapter 3687, I am thinking of the big picture. Emperor Jing Lai and the others couldn't believe their ears. Had this little girl found her conscience? She was actually willing to give up the fat meat in her mouth? Yun Chujiu seemed to have noticed the suspicion of the others. She immediately took out the alliance contract from her storage ring and tore it into pieces. The alliance contract has been broken. You should believe it now, right? It was only then that Emperor Jing Lai and the others believed Yun Chujiu's words. They were overjoyed and kept complimenting her, wishing that they could praise Yun Chujiu like a flower. Prime Minister Sima, who was standing at the side, felt as if he had heard a dog's voice in his heart. Had their emperor gone mad, or was he stupid? He had actually given up this good opportunity to surpass the 8 nations? After Emperor Jing Lai and the others praised He Xinjiu, they suddenly felt that the dishes were fragrant and the wine was thick. They were in a great mood. Everyone, the Lihan Palace will retreat in a few days. How do you think we should divide the forces of the Lihan Palace? Yun Chujiu said with a smile. Emperor Jing Lai immediately said excitedly, our transformation heavenly kingdom won't fight with everyone. We just need to divide the area near Lotus City to our transformation heavenly kingdom. Hearing Emperor Jing Lai's words, the kings of the other countries immediately had ugly expressions on their faces. Your Majesty Jing Lai, do you take us for fools? There are 2 spirit mineral veins near Lotus City, which are the richest places in the territory of the Lihan Palace. Why should we change the heavenly state for you? Emperor Jing Lai argued with a red face. Why? Because our change the heavenly state has contributed the most this time. Naturally, our change the heavenly state should be the first to choose. Pooey! You shameless bastard! How can your transformation heavenly kingdom contribute the most? Does your transformation heavenly kingdom contribute more than our Zhu heavenly kingdom? What does your Zhu heavenly kingdom count as? It's still our Hao heavenly kingdom that contributes the most. Lotus City should belong to our Hao heavenly kingdom. Yun Chujiu chewed on the fruit and looked coldly at Emperor Jing Lai and the others who were quarreling with each other. As expected, people could only share hardships but not wealth. Look, the Lihan Palace had yet to retreat and they were already fighting. Just as the 8 country emperors were about to fight, the teacup in Yun Chujiu's hand fell to the ground. The sound of the teacup breaking finally made the red-faced Emperor Jing Lai and the others quiet down. Then, they looked at Yun Chujiu in confusion. Yun Chujiu said coldly, is it fun? Do you think there will be a result if you continue to argue like this? Emperor Jing Lai and the others looked at each other unwillingly, but they did not say anything. Yun Chujiu's tone became even colder. I can already foresee the future of our southern continent in the near future. Everyone will definitely fight over the division of the Lihan Palace's territory. Perhaps all 8 countries will participate in the war, and in the end, there will be chaos. At this time, the Lihan Palace will definitely make a comeback. When the time comes, we will take them down one by one. All of you will be waiting to become the ruler of a fallen country. Although Emperor Jing Lai and the others didn't say anything, they were obviously not convinced. They felt that Yun Chujiu was just scaring them. Do you think I am scaring you? Even if the hateful palace doesn't make a comeback, there will definitely be other forces from the northern continent that will infiltrate. The southern continent is like a piece of fat meat in the eyes of the various forces of the northern continent. They all want to take a bite out of it. If the southern continent were to fall into chaos, they would definitely infiltrate in all sorts of names. At that time, not to mention your throne, everyone would become slaves of the northern continent. Do you think that I made you sign the BET in order to take advantage of you? Wrong. Very wrong. I am willing to be a villain for the sake of the big picture. Chapter 3688 is what you think it is. Yun Chujiu glanced at Emperor Jing Lai and the others before continuing, only if our East Phoenix Kingdom is slightly stronger than you can we have the right to speak and maintain the peace of the 9 nations. You must think that I'm being hypocritical, but to you, power and the throne are extremely important. To me, these are just fleeting memories. I've never cared about these things, I have always been a person who is indifferent to fame and fortune. Everyone, indifferent to fame and fortune? Don't you fucking feel your face ache when you say these words? Furthermore, this emperor can guarantee to all of you that the situation of the southern continent's 9 countries coexisting will not change. Your lives will not be any different from before. Moreover, if all of the spirit stone mines in your country that were originally controlled by the Li Hen Palace are returned to you, our Eastern Phoenix Kingdom will not take a single cent. You can choose what you want to do. I will not force you. After all, I am a reasonable person. After Yun Chujiu finished speaking, she calmly looked at Emperor Jing Lai and the others with a casual expression. If Emperor Jing Lai and the others had not fallen out with each other at the beginning of the banquet, they would naturally have discussed it. However, now that they did not like each other, there was no need for them to discuss it. They could only make their own plans. They had to admit that what this girl said made some sense. If the territory of the Li Hen Palace was not evenly divided, it would inevitably lead to war. The people of the northern continent might take advantage of the situation. According to what they had said earlier, handing over the territory of the Li Hen Palace to the East Phoenix Kingdom could be considered a solution. After all, although this girl had a lot of bad intentions, she did not dare to risk the world's disapproval. She would really openly go against the 8 kingdoms. Moreover, she had taken the initiative to give up on the bet. If they were to take it seriously, they had no other choice. Thus, Emperor Jing Lai and the others had stiff expressions on their faces. In the end, they agreed to give all of the territory of the Li Hen Palace to the East Phoenix Kingdom. He Xinjiu was not ecstatic. She only had a calm expression on her face, as if she was trying to act pretentious. Emperor Jing Lai and the others persisted for a while before they left. After sending everyone away, Prime Minister Sima congratulated He Xinjiu and asked suspiciously, "Your Majesty, aren't you afraid that they won't agree with you if you break the alliance agreement?" He Xinjiu curled her lips and took out an alliance agreement. She said faintly, "The one that was destroyed is just a piece of waste paper. When have I ever made such a loss-making deal?" Prime Minister Sima, "Your Majesty, what should we do next?" The East Phoenix Kingdom and the Li Hen Palace are separated by the Yutian Kingdom and the Yangtian Kingdom. I'm afraid that it will be a little inconvenient to govern them. Prime Minister Sima said while looking at the map. What's inconvenient about it? The East Phoenix Kingdom is in the middle of the 9 countries. It's the best place to develop and do business. As for the territory of the Li Hen Palace, let's make it the capital of the towering Sky Empire. Prime Minister Sima's old eyes widened. He could not believe his ears. The towering Sky Empire. Your Majesty, you. What do you mean? What you think I mean? He Xinjiu curled her lips. Let's not settle the title first. Let's take over the territory of the Li Hen Palace first. Since Emperor Jing Lai and the others had already taken a step back, they would take a second and a third step back. They had been enslaved by the Li Hen Palace for so many years and had endured it. This showed that they were very timid and would agree with this emperor's idea. Moreover, setting up the towering Sky Empire isn't like taking away their throne. It's just making them vassal states. It's not a big deal. Go ahead and do it. Chapter 3689, Atlas Empire. Prime Minister Sima did not even know how he walked out of the meeting tent. He was truly stunned by His Majesty's step-by-step plan. The daughter of an official from a third-class country who had been brought back from a lower-class continent had actually become the female emperor of Atlas Southern Continent in less than 2 years. This was simply something that ordinary people did not dare to dream about. However, His Majesty had done it. His Majesty did not have any background, nor did she have any superb spiritual power. She had actually relied on her intelligence to strategize and unify Atlas Southern Continent. What kind of heroic feat was this? Prime Minister Sima only felt an indescribable excitement surging in his heart. It could be considered that he had been blessed by His Majesty. He was originally a prime minister of a third-tier country. Now that he was about to become the Prime Minister of Atlas Empire, his ancestral grave was really emitting green smoke. In the meeting tent, Shui Wuji clicked his tongue and said, little sister Jill, in terms of scheming, I am ashamed to admit that I am inferior. Your ability to play with people's hearts is something that I will never be able to learn in my next life. Yun Chujio glanced at him. Brother Wuji, why do I feel that you are mocking me instead of complimenting me? Shui Wuji laughed out loud. I am most likely influenced by Buttface. Even when I say good things, I say bad things. Yun Chujio pursed her lips. She was also very helpless. Her spiritual power was insufficient, so she could only gather her intelligence. If she didn't play some tricks, how could she quickly expand her power? How could she quickly make money? She still had to raise De Hua, that money-burning good-for-nothing. Half a month later, the people of the Li Hate Palace had indeed retreated from the southern continent. The people of the East Phoenix Kingdom took over the territory of the Li Hate Palace, so Yun Chujio naturally moved into the Li Hate Palace. This fellow was afraid that when the Li Hen Palace retreated, it would set up some sort of array formation in the palace. He searched inside and out dozens of times, and after confirming that there was nothing wrong, he moved in. When the Li Hen Palace retreated, not only did they take away all the good things in the palace, they even used barbaric methods to plunder a large part of the mineral vein. Yun Chujio had long expected this, so she was not too surprised. After all, this small loss was negligible compared to the long-drawn-out war. After another half a month, after the East Phoenix Kingdom had completely taken control of the situation, He Xinjiu sent the national letter to Emperor Jing Lai and the other three. Translated into plain English, it read, "Everyone, we cannot have a leaderless army in the southern continent. After thinking about it, I am the most suitable to be the leader. Although I am a little young and I do not have enough experience, I am kind-hearted and I have a good fiancé. Therefore, I have decided to establish the Towering Sky Empire in 10 days. When that time comes, I will ascend the throne shamelessly. Do not think about objecting because objections are also invalid. Although I have always loved peace, I am not afraid of you if we really fight. Moreover, even if I become the female emperor of the Towering Sky Empire, your position as the ruler of the country will still be secure. There will be no harm to you. So, just accept your fate. Finally, I would like to remind you to remember to bring a generous congratulatory gift when you come. Otherwise, I will be unhappy." When Emperor Jing Lai and the others received the national letter, 5 of them fainted from anger. Although the other 3 did not faint from anger, they were still trembling from anger. This female Emperor Fenghua was really too shameless. The Towering Sky Empire. What happened to the peaceful coexistence? What happened to the agreement that the 9 nations would stand side by side? Wasn't this in turn turning them all into vassal states? Turning them all into her subjects? It turned out that this step was all planned by her. They were simply blinded by the lard oil in their hearts and actually thought that she was a good person. She was simply a devil who ate people without spitting out their bones. Chapter 3690, The Coronation Ceremony. Although Jing Lai Emperor and the others were furious, they had no choice but to accept it in the end. So what if they didn't accept it? Was there really going to be a war? They were used to being at ease. If they hadn't been forced to do so last time, they wouldn't have rebelled against the Li Hen Palace. Therefore, during the coronation ceremony, Jing Lai Emperor and the others eagerly brought expensive gifts to pay their respects. He Xinjiu's name had always been abandoned, and the name of Atlas Empire had been decided. This fellow was too lazy to give himself another title. She was still the peerless female emperor of the world, or the female emperor of the world. After the coronation, everyone knelt down and shouted, "Female Emperor of Magnificence is a peerless beauty in the world. Female Emperor of the Wind and Flowers sink the fish fall the geese close the moon shame. Female Emperor of Zephyr is invincible." He Xinjiu felt that every pore on her body was relaxed. She was so beautiful that she could not be more beautiful. After the glorious coronation ceremony, He Xinjiu lived a blissful life of eating, drinking, and flirting with the gigolo. Unfortunately, a few days after the blissful life, Di Baiming left with Shui Wuji and Enfeng. This guy waved his handkerchief and reluctantly sent Di beaming away. Then, he put his mind on governing the country. Although Emperor Jing Lai and the others were still honest, they might cause trouble one day. Therefore, He Xinjiu thought of a few ways to restrict them and arranged for Prime Minister Sima to do it. Prime Minister Sima was as busy as a top all day, but the old man became more and more energetic. He immediately went to do it. Seeing that the matter was progressing smoothly, Yun Chuzhou shifted her attention to cultivation. She counted with her fingers. It had been a long time since Wu Yun had formed a group to take revenge, so why was there still no movement? Although little Wu Yun usually absorbed some of the power of lightning, it was simply a drop in the bucket for a pervert like her. It was not of much use at all. Without the lightning, He Xinjiu could do nothing but stare helplessly. She had no choice but to get people to collect formulas for refining pills and talismans and spend the whole day in the imperial palace. One day, while He Xinjiu was hiding in the imperial study making talismans, a palace maid came in to report. "Your Majesty, Crown Prince Yun has something to see you about." The Crown Prince Yun that the palace maid mentioned was Yun Zhichen. He and Prime Minister Sima could be said to be He Xinjiu's right-hand men. Hearing that Yun Zhichen wanted to see her, He Xinjiu naturally agreed. After the two of them met, they exchanged a few pleasantries. In private, the two of them still addressed each other as brother and sister. Yun Zhichen went straight to the point and explained the reason for his visit. "Little sister Jiu, in a few days, the Yun family will hold the ancestor worship ceremony once every 10 years. Grandfather has sent a message and wants you to go back and attend the ancestor worship ceremony. What do you think?" Yun Chujia's eyes flashed. She naturally knew old King Yun's intention. It was nothing more than that she had made a fortune and wanted to show off in front of the ancestor's grave. It just so happened that this fellow had nothing to do recently and had not seen her grandfather and grandmother for a long time. It would be good to go back and pay respects to her ancestors and take a break. Therefore, she nodded. "I miss my grandfather and grandmother a little too. I will arrange the matters at hand and set off in 3 days." Seeing that Yun Chuzhou had agreed, Yun Zhichen was naturally filled with joy. Just as he was about to say something, he heard He Xinjiu say, "Fifth brother, go down and prepare well. No matter what, I am still the Qing Tian Empire's female emperor of glory. You know what I mean." Yun Zhichen was stunned at first, then he understood the underlying meaning of this fellow's words. This fellow just wanted to go back and show off. Chapter 3691, Ancestor Worship Ceremony. 10 days later, Empress Jiu and her entourage's flying spirit tools arrived in An City. Although Yun Chuzhou had repeatedly sent letters to old King Yun and the old princess consort to move to the capital of Qingtian Empire, the old lattice homeland was hard to leave and she had always stayed in the old King Yun's mansion. On the other hand, the other few houses of the Yun family had basically moved to the capital of a first-class country. This time, they had all returned. The imperial residence of King Yun was once again bustling with noise and excitement. At this moment, everyone was waiting respectfully for Yun Chuzhou outside An City. After all, today was different from the past. Even if they were relatives, their statuses were as different as clouds and mud. They were afraid that Yun Chuzhou would be dissatisfied with them. Everyone looked at the several flying spirit tools that were approaching from afar and could not help but sigh in their hearts. Who would have thought that the little girl from back then would suddenly become the female emperor of the towering Sky Empire? This was something that no one would have ever dreamed of. The flying spirit tools that the guards were riding on landed first, isolating the surrounding commoners who were watching the show. Then, there were more than a dozen beautiful palace maids were lined up on both sides, laying a snow-white carpet on the ground. At this moment, the most luxurious flying spirit tool finally landed on the ground. He Xinjiu got down from the flying spirit tool and slowly walked towards the crowd. Today, Empress Jiu was wearing a red dress that was as bright as fire, which increased her aura. The crowd couldn't help but kneel down and kowtow to her. Yun Chuzhou didn't stop her. Sometimes, being too friendly wasn't necessarily a good thing. When it was time to establish one's authority, one still had to establish one's authority. Of course, this fellow didn't go so far as to ask old Duke Yun and old consort Yun to bow to her. She had already asked someone to support the two elders to the side. After bowing, He Xinjiu said a few polite words. Then, she hopped over to the old consort's side and held her arm. She said playfully, "Grandmother, do you miss little Jiu?" The old consort really couldn't connect the dignified female emperor from before with this little girl who looked like a monkey. She was stunned for a moment before she said with a smile, "Of course, grandmother misses you. Let's go. Grandmother has prepared a lot of your favorite food for you." A group of people escorted He Xinjiu to the Cloud King's mansion. He Xinjiu was somewhat moved by the fact that she had returned to the Cloud King's mansion. When she first entered the Cloud King's mansion, it could be said that she was treading on thin ice. Now, she was finally able to hold her head up high. When she came, she had planned to show off. However, when she really saw the people from the Cloud King's mansion, her thoughts of showing off faded and she felt that it was meaningless. She even did not want to go to the ancestor worship because this guy finally realized that the last time she went to the ancestor worship, she went to the ancestor's tomb in the middle of the night. If it was not for the black bead that woke her up, something might have happened. However, in the end, this guy still went to the floating Cloud Mountain's ancestor's tomb to worship the ancestor reluctantly because of old Duke Yun and old consort Yun. He Xinjiu comforted herself. This time, not only did she have a high level of spiritual power, but she also brought a lot of guards with her. It should not be the same problem as last time. Moreover, she was determined not to stay over. She did not believe that there would be any problems in broad daylight. After the members of the Yun family arrived at the Yun family's ancestral tomb, an elder from the family clan began to host the ancestral worship ceremony. He Xinjiu followed the crowd like a puppet to pay respects to the ancestors. When the ancestor worship ceremony was more than halfway through, the elder from the family clan specially gave a scholarly speech. It was nothing more than praising He Xinjiu's achievements in a variety of ways, giving the Yun family face. He Xinjiu was originally a little drowsy. When she heard this, her eyes immediately widened. Oh my, there was such a treatment. Chapter 3692 stayed in the manner it had to be said that the person who wrote this toast was not bad. Every sentence had reached He Xinjiu's heart. He Xinjiu was simply too beautiful. At the end of the ancestor worship ceremony, this fellow was still somewhat unsatisfied. He wished that he could let people recite that toast 10 or 8 times more. At this time, the sky was already turning dark. According to the old King Yun and the old consort, they would naturally go to the manor for a night. However, He Xinjiu lied and said that she had something important to do, so she had to hurry back. When the old King Yun and the old consort heard this, they could only decide to return overnight. When the Yun family had just left the ancestral mausoleum a few miles away, a group of people came from afar. The leader was Yun Fengde, whom Yun Chujiu had met previously. He was also the son of the leader of the Yun family who was in charge of guarding the mausoleum. Yun Fengde hurried to the front, he had a puzzled look on his face. "Patriarch, are you leaving? Don't you always have to stay at the manor? Why are you in a hurry to leave this time? But when I received you last time, was there anything that wasn't done well enough?" Old Duke Yun's face was somewhat embarrassed. He explained, "Fengde, you're thinking too much. It's just that little Jiu has something to deal with. You also know that she is now the ruler of the towering Sky Empire, so she naturally has a lot of things to deal with, so we plan to leave overnight." Although old Duke Yun's words were an explanation, it was not difficult to hear that there was a hint of pride in his words. There was a kind of pride that the Yun family had in having a daughter who had just grown up. Yun Fengde seemed to have only noticed Yun Chujiu in the crowd at this time. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted, "Greetings, Your Majesty. I didn't know that Your Majesty was here, so I have neglected you. Please forgive me, Your Majesty." Yun Chujiu blinked her eyes. This person was lying through his teeth. Zhuangzi was so close to the ancestral tomb. How could he not know that she had come with him to worship the ancestors? If he had not been paying attention to the situation here, how could he have rushed over when they had just left a few miles away? However, the rules of the Yun family were also quite strange. The Yun family members who were responsible for guarding the tomb were not allowed to participate in the worship of the ancestors. It was simply unbelievable. Although several thoughts flashed through Yun Chujia's mind, she did not show it on her face. She said calmly, "Those who don't know won't be blamed. Get up." Yun Fengde then stood up and said, "Your Majesty, it's difficult to walk through the dense forest at night. Why don't we go to the village to rest for a night? It's not too late to leave when the sky is getting brighter." Yun Chuzhou was about to refuse when it suddenly started to rain. Yun Chuzhou frowned. It was difficult to walk in the rain, but she was worried that her grandfather and grandmother would not be able to take it, so she could only stay the night. Therefore, she nodded. "All right, then we'll stay at the manor for the night. Sorry to bother you." Yun Fengde quickly said a few polite words and brought the group into the manor. The people of the Yun family stayed in the same guest house as last time, and it was very clean. As soon as everyone arrived, someone from the manor immediately brought hot water and hot dishes. They were the spirit rice, chicken, duck, and fish eggs produced by the manor. He Xinjiu ate until her mouth was full of oil. She felt that it was not bad to stay in the manor for a night. At most, she would not sleep tonight. What could happen? After dinner, everyone washed up and rested. He Xinjiu was arranged to stay in a separate room. In order to resist sleepiness, He Xinjiu released Buttface to relieve her boredom. After all, this guy looked like a yellow puppy. No one would think that he was an amazing spiritual beast. Chapter 3693 Re-entering the ancestral tomb. Buttface was suffocating in the spirit beast bag and was finally released. Naturally, the room was filled with fun. Yun Chuzhou couldn't bear to look at him. With his idiotic appearance, even if there was a sign of Cheong Qi hanging around his neck, no one would believe that he was one of the four great fierce beasts, Cheong Qi. Buttface hopped around the room for a while and moved closer to He Xinjia's bedside. Originally, he was planning to jump onto the bed, but when he remembered the jealous nature of a certain person, he still obediently laid on the bedside. "Little fairy, it's already so late, why aren't you sleeping? Did you miss me?" Cheong Qi said shamelessly. He Xinjiu ignored this idiot. She lay on the bed and thought that since Yun Fengde insisted on keeping them here, he must have some kind of plan. What exactly was his plan? Seeing that Yun Chuzhou ignored him, Buttface did not give up. Instead, he felt that such a cool master was a rare good master in the world. Listening to Buttface's chattering by the bed, He Xinjiu could not help but feel sleepy. She said to Buttface, "You guard well. I'll take a nap." Buttface immediately said obsequiously, "Little fairy, rest assured and sleep. I promise to guard you well." A moment later, Yun Chuzhou fell into a deep sleep while Buttface stayed by the bed dutifully. It had to be said that although this guy's brain was a little strange, he was still reliable. The patter of rain outside gradually stopped, and the full moon emerged from the thick layers of clouds. The clear light sprinkled into the room, making everything appear quiet and peaceful. When Buttface saw that the moon had come out, he could not help but be a little excited. He began to play with his own shadow on the ground foolishly, and for a moment, he was having a lot of fun. At this moment, Yun Chuzhou suddenly sat up. Her eyes were empty and vacant, and she left the room like a ghost. She was so fast that Buttface did not have time to react. When Buttface reacted, he only saw an afterimage of Yun Chuzhou. Buttface was dumbfounded. What happened to the little fairy? Was she sleepwalking? He had never heard that she had this problem. Although Cheong Qi was very confused, he was afraid that He Xinjiu would be in danger, so he chased after the afterimage. Yun Chujia's figure was as fast as a phantom. Although there were people patrolling the manor, no one noticed that she had left the manor. Some people noticed Buttface, but seeing that he was only a yellow puppy, they didn't think much of it and let him run out of the manor. But Face chased after her fiercely, and finally saw Yun Chujo standing in the Yun family's ancestral mausoleum from afar. At this moment, the Yun family's ancestral mausoleum was under the moonlight. It was indescribably strange. But Face couldn't help but shiver. He felt that there was something unusual about this place. But Face kept calling Yun Chujo with his spiritual sense, but it was completely useless. But Face thought that since it was like this, he would just bite the little fairy. If she was in pain, it might be better. Therefore, But Face pounced toward Hei Shinjo. When he got close to Hei Shinjo, he jumped up and bit her hand. Ouch! Yun Chujo screamed and looked at the situation in front of her in a daze. Little fairy, you're finally awake. You scared me to death. Why are you sleepwalking all of a sudden? But Face nagged. Yun Chujo didn't answer But Face. Instead, she said in horror, let's go. Let's leave this place quickly. But Face also felt that this place was very strange, so he quickly followed Yun Chujo out of the ancestral tomb. Chapter 3694, Meng Yanshou. There was only one thought in Yun Chujia's mind, and that was to leave this place immediately. If the first time was a coincidence, there was definitely something wrong with the second time. There must be some secret hidden in the Yun family's ancestral grave. However, she was not interested in finding out the secret. It was more important to leave this place as soon as possible. Yun Chujo originally thought that there would be some kind of trouble when she left, such as being trapped by an array formation or something crawling out of the grave. However, none of the strange things that she imagined happened. She and But Face had successfully arrived near the manor. Although the guards had discovered them, they did not dare to ask too much. They obediently let them go and let her into the manor. Yun Chujo returned to her room, still in shock. But Face, who was usually talkative, had also calmed down. After a moment, But Face could not help but ask, Little fairy, what happened just now? Yun Chujo shook her head. I don't know what happened either. I have no memory of what happened just now, and I've had such an incident before. But Face's interest was piqued. He asked Yun Chujo to tell him about what happened last time. After hearing that, he wagged his tail and said, this thing is quite strange. Why does it feel like something that pervert did? Yun Chujo knew that the pervert that But Face was referring to was Meng Yanshou. Her heart skipped a beat. Needless to say, this situation was really similar to how Meng Yanshou controlled humans. She immediately released Meng Yanshou. Meng Yanshou had already learned about what was happening outside from Xiao Haniu's mouth. As soon as it was released, it glared at But Face and cursed him in its heart. Damn it, you are the pervert, your family is all perverts. Besides, what does this little fairy being possessed have to do with him? He actually made him the scapegoat. It was really detestable. Although Meng Yanshou hated But Face in his heart, he only dared to glare at him a few times. After all, But Face was a fierce beast. If he recovered his strength in the future, it would be terrible for him to take revenge on Meng Yanshou. When Yun Chujo saw Meng Yanshou's appearance, she knew that Meng Yanshou had a general understanding of the situation. She asked, Curly hair, what do you think? Meng Yanshou said unhappily, what can I think? I'm not your spiritual pet. I can see what's happening outside with your spiritual sense. I'm just a poor little thing that I picked up. Yun Chujo, why did these words sound so sour? But Face, who was at the side, rolled around laughing. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Little fairy, it's jealous. It's jealous of me. It must be jealous because it thinks that curly hair doesn't sound as good as But Face. Meng Yanshou, well, in terms of name, it still felt that the black-hearted little girl was much better to it than this idiot. But Face? Damn it, if it was given such a name, it would rather bang its head against the wall. Yun Chujo coughed dryly. Curly hair, it's not that I don't want to accept you as a spiritual pet, but your main body is in the Tianyuan continent. Right now, I still have no way to break the 10,000-year black iron chain on your body. Don't worry, when the time is right, I will definitely save your main body and let you be my spiritual pet. Meng Yanshou snorted coldly. I don't care about spiritual pets or spiritual pets. I just feel that butt-face has wronged me. What does this have to do with me? Why did he throw the blame on my head? Yun Chujiu was too lazy to expose him. She said, "Curly hair, we are not suspecting you. We just think that you are knowledgeable, so we want to ask your opinion." Chapter 3695, The Mystery of the Ancestral Grave. When the nightmare beast heard Yun Chujiu's words, its mouth immediately split open and it said smugly, "So that's how it is. Then you've really asked the right beast." Meng Yanshou. I've thought about it carefully just now. The 2 times you've come to pay respects to the ancestors were on a full moon night. Could it be that your Yun family's ancestors were lonely underground and wanted to find you to accompany them? Scram! Yun Chujiu kicked the Meng Yanshou to the corner of the wall. It was pure nonsense. However, there was one point that it made sense. The 2 times were indeed on a full moon night. Could it be that there was something in the ancestral mausoleum that only came out on a full moon night? How did that thing control her? One thing was certain. That thing could only control her after she fell asleep. What was going on? Meng Yanshou limped up from the corner of the wall. He said mysteriously, "Little fairy, why don't you arrest Yun Fengde and interrogate him? I think he should know something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have insisted on letting you stay for the night." Yun Chujiu held her chin and thought for a while. She decided not to alert the enemy first. She had a bad feeling that it was better not to see the light of day about the secret of the Yun family's ancestral tomb. She always felt that this was an extraordinary secret. Anyway, she would not come to worship the ancestors no matter what. Even if there was something fishy about the ancestral tomb, it would not bother her. It was not worth the risk. Yun Chujiu kept her eyes wide open until dawn. Just after breakfast, Yun Fengde came over. Yun Fengde only said a few words to persuade her to stay. He also said that his father happened to be in closed-door cultivation, so he was impolite to Yun Yun. Old Duke Yun exchanged a few pleasantries with him, and then the Yun family left the manor to return. On the way back, Yun Chujiu remembered what Yun Fengde said in the morning, and her heart moved. Why was Yun Fengde father in closed-door cultivation when they came here twice? Wasn't it too much of a coincidence? Thinking of this, Yun Chujiu asked old Duke Yun unintentionally, "Grandfather, is Yun Fengde father, that is, the manor head, absent every time he offers sacrifices to his ancestors?" Old Duke Yun frowned and thought for a moment, "Not really. I can see him sometimes, but I haven't seen him most of the time." Yun Chujiu's heart moved again. "Then when can I see him? I'm really curious. Why haven't I seen him these 2 times? Old Duke Yun couldn't help but laugh. "I guess he happened to be in closed-door cultivation. I might see him next time." The old consort at the side laughed and said, "Speaking of which, I realized that he doesn't seem to be around when we arrive at the 15th. Little Jiu, you might be able to meet him the next time you come to visit on another day." Yun Chujiu smiled and replied a few sentences, but she was shocked in her heart. It seemed that what happened in the ancestral tomb was most likely related to that manor head. It was just that she did not know what role he played in it. Thinking about it carefully, there were many strange things about the Yun family's ancestral mausoleum. They had sent a branch to guard the mausoleum, but they were not allowed to participate in the ancestral worship. Moreover, all these strange things only happened to her. Yun Chujiu thought about it for a long time, but she could not come up with any clues. She decided not to think about it anymore. After all, she would never go to that damn place again. Yun Chujiu originally planned to stay in an city for a few more days, but after receiving the voice transmission talisman from Prime Minister Sima, her expression instantly turned ugly. A moment later, she hid the strange expression on her face and found an excuse to bid farewell to old King Yun and the old princess consort. Although old King Yun and the old princess consort were reluctant to part, they knew that their granddaughter was now carrying a heavy burden on her shoulders, so they could only leave in tears. Chapter 3696 Tower Master Luchen's request for marriage. Little sister Jo, what happened? Yun Jichen felt that something was wrong. He knew this little sister Jo too well. As an emperor, she was a loose cannon. Unless something big had happened, she wouldn't be so anxious to rush back. Yun Chujo didn't hide anything and told him the contents of Prime Minister Sima's voice transmission talisman. What? The pavilion master of the 9 pavilions wants to marry you? What do you plan to do? Yun Jichen did not know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. Logically speaking, the position of the pavilion master of the 9 pavilions in the northern continent was definitely worthy of Little Ninth Sister. Moreover, Little Ninth Sister was already high up in the hierarchy. However, the problem was that Little Ninth Sister already had someone in her heart. According to the rumors from Prime Minister Sima, their sons were already several years old. Moreover, according to Little Ninth Sister, the hateful palace was a force of the 9 pavilions. The ultimate goal of marrying Little Ninth Sister was probably to control the southern continent. However, if Little Ninth Sister did not agree, the 9 pavilions would not stop like this. They would definitely cause trouble. It was really troublesome. Yun Chujo did not answer Yun Jichen because she did not know what to do next. When she thought of the 9 pavilions, she thought of the puppets number 1, number 2, and number 3 that had self-detonated. Her eyes flashed with hatred. Even if she died, she would not marry that ingrate Lan Luochen. Although she had expected that he would not let this matter rest, she did not expect it to come so quickly. According to her estimation, the 9 pavilions would be wary of the other factions in the northern continent and would not make a move within 2 to 3 years. She did not expect Lan Luochen to come up with an excuse to appease the other factions in the northern continent so quickly. Although she was now the female emperor of the towering Sky Empire, the strength of the southern continent was not even worth mentioning when compared to the Li Hen Palace. The reason why the Li Hen Palace had always taken a roundabout approach was because they were wary of the other factions in the northern continent. Otherwise, they would have already occupied the southern continent by force. Seeing that Yun Chujo did not speak, Yun Jichen comforted her. Little Ninth Sister, you don't have to worry too much. Even if you don't agree, the 9-layered pavilion is wary of the other factions in the northern continent, so they don't dare to really send troops to attack our southern continent. Moreover, their northern continent's spiritual power will be much weaker when they arrive in our southern continent. Even if they really send troops, they might not be a match for our southern continent. Yun Chujo sighed. Although what you said is right, don't forget that my position as the female emperor is not stable. Although the Yutian Kingdom and the other 8 countries have submitted to us, if the 9-layered pavilion really attacks us, they might very well switch sides at the last minute. At that time, our situation will be worrying. Furthermore, since the 9-layered pavilion would send a letter asking for marriage, it means that they already have an excuse to deal with the other powers in the northern continent. I'm afraid that the other powers might not interfere. When Yun Jichen heard this, he immediately panicked. This wouldn't do either. Could it be that he could only marry Tower Master Luochen? Yun Zichen's eyes suddenly lit up. Little Ninth Sister, why don't you send a message to young Master D? Maybe he has a way. Yun Chujo smiled bitterly. Before D Baiming left, he had specifically said that the place he went to could not be used with the voice transmission talisman. She could not contact him now. Seeing Yun Chuji's bitter smile, Yun Jichen guessed that there was an inside story. He comforted her. Little sister Jo, don't be too anxious. You are the most resourceful. You will definitely think of a way. Back then, we were threatened by the 3 kingdoms of the South Dragon Kingdom. Later, we were besieged by the 3 kingdoms of the Jingwood Kingdom. Didn't we also rely on borrowed strength to survive? So, there must be a way. Chapter 3697, The Cat That Came Up with the Idea. Yun Chujo laughed bitterly again. 5th brother, back then, I used the power to fight and even lured the tiger to drive the wolf away. That was because I knew those people's weaknesses. Moreover, my words carried a certain weight with them. But now, even if I go to those forces in the northern continent to discuss the pros and cons, do you think they will listen to me? I'm afraid I won't even be able to meet the leaders of those forces. This, Yun Jichen didn't know what to say. The southern continent really didn't have any say in the northern continent, even if Yun Chujiu was the ruler of the towering Sky Empire. For a moment, both of them fell into silence. Yun Chujiu gritted her teeth. There would always be a way. She had already prepared for the worst. If she really couldn't think of any other way, then she would gather people at the northern continent's borders to prepare to face the enemy. Even if it was possible to face internal and external problems, she would definitely not marry that ingrate Lan Luochen. 7 days later, Yun Chujiu's flying spiritual device arrived at the imperial capital of the towering Sky Empire. As soon as she returned to the imperial palace, Prime Minister Sima arrived with a worried look on his face. Your Majesty, Emperor Jing Lai and the other 8 emperors have been waiting for you at the courier station for several days. It seems that they have already received the news. It's just that I don't know how they got the news. Yun Chujiu sneered, how? It's nothing more than the spies of the hateful palace. When they retreated back then, how could they not hold back? What is their attitude? Your Majesty, they are all inclined to marry you. After all, those people were used to being suppressed by the hateful palace. When they heard the name of the 9 pavilions, their legs turned to jelly, Prime Minister Sima said disdainfully. Yun Chujiu had long expected this, so she was not too surprised. Internal and external problems were probably what she was talking about. Even so, she still dressed up and went to see Emperor Jing Lai and the others. In their conversation, Emperor Jing Lai and the others expressed their intentions very clearly. They did not want to go through another war and had Yun Chujiu marry obediently. Even if Yun Chujiu suggested that the 9-storied pavilion's goal in marrying her was to occupy the southern continent, Emperor Jing Lai and the others did not change their minds. Yun Chujiu sneered in her heart. It must be because the 9-layered pavilion had already promised this person that they would brazenly force her out of the palace. It was a pity that she was not fully fledged yet. Otherwise, she would have really taken down all the 8 kingdoms. Yun Chujiu did not argue with them. She only gave a few perfunctory words with a faint expression before leaving in a hurry. Yun Chujiu returned to her bedroom and sent the palace maids and guards away. Then, she let out all the silly cuties and asked them to work together to help her think of a solution. But Fei stretched out his little paw and said arrogantly, "Little fairy, you are a scourge. What are you afraid of? Just marry that Chen. You will kill him. You will kill his whole family. Even his dog will be killed. Get lost." Yun Chujiu kicked the idiot away. She wished she could take a rag and stuff it in its mouth. Meng Yanshou was holding a script that he had not finished reading. He rolled his eyes and said, "Little fairy, why don't you elope? Isn't that what the script says? Get lost too." Yun Chujiu felt that she had really lost her mind. What kind of stupid idea were these two coming up with? One was more unreliable than the other. The kitten's lowered eyes were filled with schadenfreude. It wished that something bad would happen to Yun Chujiu. As long as Yun Chujiu died, it would be free. Moreover, it might even be able to eat those idiots to increase its strength. It rolled its eyes. It had to come up with a bad idea for her. It was best to let her kill herself as soon as possible. Chapter 3698 Cat Cub's Good Idea. Cat Cub said weakly, "Meow, Master, I have an idea. I don't know if it will work. Even if it doesn't, don't kick me, okay?" Yun Chujiu nodded, "Speak." "Meow, Master, with your ability alone, you obviously can't fight against the 9 pavilions. You have to borrow their strength." Who can fight against the 9 pavilions? The answer was obvious. It was all the major forces in the northern continent. So, you only have one way now. That is to join a sect in the northern continent that can go against the 9 pavilions. That way, the 9 pavilions cannot do anything to you for the time being. When your Prince Charming returns, he will definitely have a way to help you escape. By then, won't the problem be solved? Yun Chujo did not expect the kitten to come up with any good ideas, not to mention that it was acting suspiciously now. However, when she heard what it said, her heart skipped a beat. She could guess that the kitten's motive was most likely to send her to the northern continent to die. After all, anyone from the northern continent had a higher spiritual power than her. Perhaps she would meet with danger very soon and die. However, she had to admit that this was also a good way to save herself from death. On one hand, if she passed the throne to Yun Jichen, the 9 pavilions would temporarily have no excuse. With this breathing space, the Atlas Empire could sow discord between the other 8 nations. At that time, the attention of the 8 nations would shift to fighting each other. Not only could the Atlas Empire reap the benefits, but they could also secretly increase their strength and slowly annex the other 8 nations. On the other hand, if she could enter a sect that could compete with the 9 pavilions, she could at least delay for a period of time and wait for the pretty boy to return. If she was lucky, she could stir up a pool of stagnant water in the northern continent and take the opportunity to eliminate the 9 pavilions for good. The more Yun Chujo thought about it, the more she felt that this was a great idea. She found the kitten more pleasing to the eye, and the death sentence that she had originally given him turned into a suspended death sentence. Kitten, you've made a great contribution this time. Here, I'll reward you with 2 dried fish. Hei Shinjo smiled and handed the kitten 2 dried fish. The kitten wanted to vomit when he saw the dried fish, but he was afraid that he would be exposed, so he said against his will, "Meow, thank you, master. This is what I should do." The kitten said this, but in its heart, it gritted its teeth and thought, "Stupid girl, you are really smart for a lifetime. Have you fallen into my trap? You, a weak chicken, still want to enter a big sect in the northern continent?" Tui, it's simply wishful thinking. You might just be beaten to death the moment you enter the northern continent. At that time, the sky would be high enough for the birds to fly, the sea would be wide enough for the clouds to leap. With this excellent shell, it, the white tiger, would be able to kill in all directions. Meow. The more the kitten thought about it, the happier it felt. However, its heart suddenly sank. Recently, not only did it always say, "Daddy," but why did it always imitate the meow of a cat? The kitten felt a little uneasy in its heart, but it could not tell what exactly it was uneasy about, so it simply threw it to the back of its mind. It was full of fantasies about Yun Chujo dying early so that it could regain its freedom. Yun Chujo worked for a day and 2 nights in a row. She racked her brains and wrote rapidly. It was not until the morning of the 3rd day that she summoned Yun Jichen and Prime Minister Sima into the imperial study. As soon as they met, Yun Chujo smiled and said to Yun Jichen, "Fifth brother, I once said that I would help you win the throne. Now it's time to fulfill my promise. You can sit on the throne of the towering Sky Empire." Chapter 3699, Head to the border. Yun Jichen was so frightened that he sat down on the ground. Your Majesty, what did you say?" Yun Chujo burst into laughter. "Fifth brother, I said, I'll let you sit on the throne. You're too timid. It's not a big deal. Do you have to be so afraid?" Yun Jichen felt as if 100 divine beasts were roaring in his heart. Wasn't this a big deal? This was the imperial throne of the towering Sky Empire. If this wasn't a big deal, was there anything bigger than this in the world? Seeing that Yun Jichen was still in a daze, Yun Chujo smiled and told him her plan. "Fifth brother, this imperial throne is actually a hot potato. It's not easy for me to find someone else, so I can only leave it to you." Yun Jichen naturally knew that Yun Chujo said this to let him not have any burdens, but how could he sit on this imperial throne? Yun Jichen tried all sorts of excuses, but in the end, he reluctantly agreed. However, he forcefully added another condition. That was, once Yun Chujo settled the 9 pavilions, the throne would be returned to her immediately. Yun Chujo agreed perfunctorily. In fact, although this fellow liked to show off, he didn't care too much about the position of female emperor. If it weren't for the circumstances, she wouldn't have plotted to sit on the throne step by step. In this fellow's heart, rather than being a tiring female emperor, it would be better to go around and be happy. After Yun Chujo convinced Yun Jichen, she took out a stack of papers, on which were written the future development strategies of the Atlas Empire, as well as some emergency countermeasures and so on. Yun Jichen was very apprehensive. When he saw the contents of these papers, he couldn't help but relax a little. However, in his heart, he felt that his talent was far too inferior to this little ninth sister. Yun Chujo gave a few more instructions to Prime Minister Sima. The old man's eyes were filled with tears. He really couldn't bear to part with His Majesty. The three of them discussed the details. Now, they naturally couldn't spread the news of the change in the throne. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for Yun Chujo to cross the border. Yun Chujo replied to the 9 pavilions with a letter. The gist of it was to say that the matter was important and that they needed to consider it for a period of time before giving an answer. Tower Master Luochen was certain that Yun Chujo had no way out this time, so he did not force her. He gave her a month's time limit, stating that if she still did not have a definite answer within a month, then the 9-storied pavilion could only come over to welcome the bride. When Yun Chujo received Lan Luchen's reply, she was so angry that she gritted her teeth. Although she had met many bastards, none of them made her feel so disgusted. Even for Su Yenran, who had repeatedly survived, she did not feel so disgusted. At the end of the day, there was a trace of heartache mixed in with this hatred. Lan Luochen could be considered her friend back then, but how did he become such a hateful person now? After Yun Chujo received the letter of credence, she immediately had a palace maid who looked a little like her pretend to appear outside with Prime Minister Sima and Yun Jichen to numb the spies of the 9 pavilions. Yun Chujo took a disguise pill and blended in with a group of soldiers who were heading to the border, arriving at the border between the northern and southern continents. The border was a no-fly zone within a radius of 100 li, so it was really difficult to blend in. It was easy to deal with the southern continent. Yun Jichen had already arranged for his trusted aides to secretly send Yun Chujo out of the southern continent. However, once she entered the northern continent, it would not be so easy. Although the 9 pavilions did not have many soldiers guarding the border, they could still see a few patrolling disciples. Moreover, their spiritual power was quite high. Once Yun Chujo went over, she would definitely be discovered. Chapter 3700, I am a member of the Chaotian sect. The kitten in Yun Chujia's spiritual beast pouch was very pleased when it saw the situation. Meow. This little girl would probably be killed as a spy as soon as she set foot on the northern continent's territory. Ha ha ha. It was beautiful just thinking about it. However, the kitten's beautiful dream was quickly destroyed because it saw the little girl relying on the dream created by Meng Yanshou to sneak past the defense line of the 9 pavilions. The cat cub was so hateful. This curly hair always complained about how the little girl treated him so badly. However, at the critical moment, he still went to help her. What a slut! At this time, Yun Chujo had already passed through the 9 pavilions' defense line, but she did not dare to relax. If Meng Yanshou had not used up almost all of its spiritual power to control the few patrolling disciples, she would have been caught by now. Moreover, although she had passed through the defense line, it was inevitable that there were spies from the 9 pavilions nearby, so it was better to be careful. To be on the safe side, Yun Chujo took a rejuvenation pill and turned into a 13 or 14-year-old. This fellow felt extremely regretful. If only she had that kind of pill that could directly make people unable to tell the gender. If she disguised as a teenager, the insurance factor would be much higher. In the future, when she had time, she would definitely properly fiddle with this formula. When that time came, she would let Curly Hair test the medicine. After all, its shell could be changed at any time. Meng Yanshou, who was currently standing in its spirit beast bag, violently sneezed. Why did it have a very bad premonition? Yun Chujo sped along the way. When she saw that they were about to leave the no-fly zone, she couldn't help but feel delighted. However, she didn't expect that more than 10 disciples of the 9 pavilions would appear in front of them. Yun Chujia's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that these people had already discovered her weakness and had come to intercept her? Who are you? How did you appear at the border of the northern and southern continents? The leader of a small gang questioned sternly. Yun Chujio answered with her head lowered, I am here to pick herbs. I accidentally entered this place. I will leave now. Picking herbs? You look like a spy from the southern continent. Men, take her down. Yun Chujio naturally wouldn't give up. In a moment of desperation, a flash of inspiration appeared in her head. She stomped her feet in exasperation and said, Wait. I'm only 13 years old. Can a person from the southern continent have the spiritual power of the 9th level of the spiritual transformation realm at 13 years old? Hearing that, the leader believed her a little. In their opinion, the people of the southern continent were very useless. It would be very good if they could cultivate to the 4th or 5th layer of the spiritual transformation when they were 13 or 14 years old. Even if you are not a spy of the southern continent, why did you sneak to this border? The leader questioned again. Yun Chujio bit her lips and said as if she had broken a jar, Well, since I've been discovered by you, I can only tell you the truth. I'm from the Chaotian sect. I was originally picking herbs nearby, but I was curious when I saw so many of you, so I came to take a look. I didn't expect to be found out by you when I just arrived. The leader frowned when he heard Yun Chujio's words. People from the Chaotian sect. A second-class sect like the Chaotian sect was respectful to the 9-storied pavilion, but a few months ago, because of that incident, the Chaotian sect became more suspicious of the 9-storied pavilion. Although they didn't dare to express their dissatisfaction openly. However, their relationship didn't become awkward. If this little girl was a member of Chaotian sect, it could explain why she was acting so sneakily. It was likely that she wanted to gather some information and report it back to the sect. Chapter 3701 was fortunate to have the token of Chaotian sect. Seeing the change in the expression of the leader, Yun Chujio raised her voice and said, I know I shouldn't have barged in. I was wrong, all right? Let me go. My senior brother and senior uncle will be very worried if they find out that I'm missing. The leader had been thinking about whether he should kill her to silence her. Now that he heard that there were other people of Chaotian sect nearby, especially the senior uncle mentioned by this little girl was most likely an elder of Chaotian sect. If he really killed this little girl, it would probably cause unnecessary trouble. However, for the sake of safety, the little leader still asked, What are the names of your senior brother and martial uncle? And what are your names? Show us your identity jade token. Yun Chujio had accompanied Tower Master Luo Chen on a tour of Chaotian sect back then, so she had a pretty good understanding of the affairs of Chaotian sect. She had casually given 2 names and even brought out the identity jade token she had used back then. The appearance of Chaotian sect's identity jade token could only tell the difference in identity. As for the specific identity information, only Chaotian sect people could use secret methods to check it. Therefore, Yun Chujio was not afraid that the little leader would see any flaws. As expected, the little leader was very calm when he saw Yun Chujio, and he even had an identity jade token as evidence. After warning her a few times, he let her go. The kitten in the spiritual beast bag was so angry that it was about to die. Did that person have a pig's head? He could also believe the lie that the smelly girl made up. How stupid. However, this was just the beginning. This little girl would not live for more than a few days. Very soon, she would be dead. Humph. After Yun Chujio left the no-fly zone, she summoned a flying spiritual tool and immediately flew away like a dog. To be on the safe side, this guy changed several flying spiritual artifacts along the way, and his appearance and age kept changing. Hei Shinjo sped along the way. She was not familiar with the northern continent, but she knew the route from the border to Chaotian sect. However, she was afraid that the people of the 9 pavilions would search along this route, therefore, she headed in the opposite direction of Chaotian sect. It had to be said that it was fortunate that this guy was cautious, otherwise, he might have been caught by the people of the 9 pavilions. This was because after Yun Chujio left, the small leader thought about it and reported it to the higher-ups. Soon, news came from the higher-ups, asking him to bring people to catch the little girl and interrogate her. Since the small leader couldn't catch her, the 9 pavilions arranged other people to follow the direction of Chao Tian's sect to search for her. He Xinjiu sped along and finally saw a slightly bigger city in front of her. She decided to go down and get some information, at least by a map, and then decide where to go next. Therefore, He Xinjiu landed the flying spiritual device outside the city and swaggered into the city. Someone checked the identity document at the city gate, but this guy still used the identity jade plate of the Chao Tian sect to fool her. This guy couldn't help but feel lucky. Fortunately, she had stumbled into Chao Tian's sect by accident. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy to deal with. After Yun Chujio entered the city, she went straight to the bookstore and bought a map of the northern continent and a bunch of books about the common knowledge of the northern continent. Of course, in order not to arouse suspicion, this guy also included some other books and story books. After leaving the bookstore, Yun Chujio didn't dare to stay any longer. She just bought some food and left the city in a hurry. After Yun Chujio left, people from the 9 pavilions appeared in the bookstore. After interrogating the owner of the bookstore, they began to search the city. Chapter 3702, 1 pavilion, 2 islands, 3 sects. Yun Chujio flew to a valley and changed to another flying spirit tool. Then, she turned around and flew in the opposite direction. This guy mocked himself in his heart. Fortunately, she had prepared a lot of flying spirit tools in order to walk Ray. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been enough for her. Because of this guy's cautiousness, the people of the 9-storied pavilion missed again. However, because of his repeated failures, the news was reported to Tower Master Luochen. Tower Master Luochen had been in a good mood recently. After scheming for so many years, he finally had the chance to be together for a long time. How could he not be happy? His plan this time could be said to be flawless. Previously, he had ordered the entire Lihan Palace to retreat to the northern continent in order to numb Yun Chujio and Di Baiming. As expected, Di Baiming left once again. Now that Yun Chujio was facing internal and external problems, she had no other choice but to marry him. He knew that even if Yun Chujio married him, she would still be unwilling. But so what? He had plenty of time to change her mind and erase Di Baiming from her heart bit by bit. In the end, both her heart and person would belong to him. However, when Tower Master Luochen heard his subordinate's report, the teacup in his hand immediately fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. He had a feeling that the little girl who had crossed the border was definitely Yun Chujio. She had actually sneaked into the northern continent. What did she want to do? Tower Master Luochen fell back into his chair and stared blankly for a long time. Finally, a flash of understanding appeared in his eyes. If he had guessed correctly, Little Nine was planning to join a faction that could rival the Lihan Palace. He had truly underestimated her. However, her thoughts were a bit too simple. Even if she was talented, her spiritual power was truly too low. What's more, the sects of the northern continent were not the same as those of the lower continents. The sects of the other continents would regularly open their gates to accept disciples, and they generally preferred to accept younger disciples. This way, it would be more conducive to cultivating loyalty to the sect, and it would also allow them to dig out good seedlings. The second-class sects of the northern continent and those unrated sects were also like this, but the first-class sects were not like this. These large sects had existed for tens of thousands of years, and they had enough resources to attract outstanding talents. Therefore, they did not need to expend any effort to fight for disciples, nor did they need to expend manpower and material resources to organize a large-scale disciple recruitment ceremony. If one wanted to join such a large-scale sect, one had to either rely on the recommendation of the sect's elders, or rely on the recommendation of other mighty figures in the northern continent. Of course, the descendants of the sect were blessed by the heavens, and basically all of them were able to successfully join the sect. Yun Chujio, who was neither recommended nor the descendant of a member of the sect, had extremely stringent requirements to enter a large sect. She simply couldn't enter. Thinking of this, a cold smile appeared on Tower Master Luchin's face. It was better to let her hit the wall, or else she would really think that she was omnipotent. You guys go and stand guard near the 3 great sections. You will definitely gain something. However, be careful when you make your move. Don't offend the 3 great sections. Yes. At the same time, Hei Shinjo flipped through the relevant content. The large forces in the northern continent summed up 1 pavilion, 2 islands, and 3 sections. The first pavilion referred to the 9 pavilions, and the second island referred to the Flying Flower Island and Ascension Island. The 3 sects were the Nameless Sword Sect, the Xuanwu Sect, and the Xuanji Sect. There was no need to consider the second island because the first prerequisite for the 2 islands to recruit disciples was the water spirit route. If one's aptitude was good enough, the wood spirit route would be passable, and Hei Shinjo would be useless. As for which of the remaining 3 sects to choose, Hei Shinjo had yet to decide. Chapter 3703, Nameless Sword Sect. Of course, Yun Chujo also saw that the way the 3 great sects recruited disciples was not quite the same as what she had known in the past. After complaining a little, she decided to give it a try, because she had no other choice now. Other than having someone recommend her or the descendants of the people in the sect, there was another way to join the 3 great sects, and that was to barge in. Of course, this barge was not to barge into other people's sections. Instead, the 3 great sects and the 2 islands all had special trial passages. If the challenger could pass all the trials, then he could become a disciple of the sect. As for whether he was a handyman or an outer sect disciple, that would depend on the sect's decision. If one thought that many people would go to the trial passage, then they would be gravely mistaken. Not only were the trials set up in the trial passageway treacherous and unpredictable, but they were also very dangerous. Many people would lose their lives in the first trial, and even if they died, they would die. The other sects would not care about them at all. Therefore, in the beginning, there were still people who were unwilling to attempt the trial passageway. However, tens of thousands of years had passed, and there were very few people who could pass through the trial passageway. This method of entering a sect was practically not mentioned anymore. Instead of risking her life to pass through the trial passageway, it was better to use her connections and find someone to recommend or marry an elder or disciple in the sect. Even being a concubine was a good idea. Hei Shinjo sighed. If it wasn't for the fact that time was pressing, she would have preferred to use her connections. With her eloquence and money, she should be able to befriend people from the 3 great sections. However, now that time was not allowed, she could only take the risk and go through the trial passageway. There was another reason why this fellow dared to try her luck. It was because when this fellow set off, Mao Maochio told her that the Great Void Mirror had already recovered a little and that she could enter and hide at the critical moment. Yun Chujo studied the information of the 3 great sects again and finally decided to go to the Nameless Sword Sect. The reason why she chose the Nameless Sword Sect was firstly because the Nameless Sword Sect was the closest to her. Secondly, this fellow had already grasped the sword intent of chaos. This could be considered as having some talent in practicing the sword, right? Yun Chujo made up her mind and sped toward the Nameless Sword Sect. When this fellow had left the capital of the Towering Sky Empire, he had already purchased a lot of things like chili noodles. Thus, he didn't go to the nearby towns to purchase them, and directly went outside the Nameless Sword Sect's sect. Yun Chujo had already recovered her original appearance on the flying spiritual artifact. This way, she wouldn't expose herself and cause unnecessary trouble in the future. Secondly, she did this to shut up the 9 pavilions in the future. This proved that she really had nothing to do with the Towering Sky Empire now. The mountain gate of the Nameless Sword Sect was quite different from what Yun Chujo had thought. She had thought that the mountain gate of a large sect like the Nameless Sword Sect would have a magnificent cultivation style. At the very least, it should be stronger than the Chaotian sect. However, the mountain gate in front of her couldn't be any more ordinary. If people didn't know about it, they would think that it was a small and unrated sect. Yun Chujio looked at the map and then looked at the plaque on the sect. Only then did she confirm that she didn't go to the wrong place. When Yun Chujio was looking around, the disciples guarding the gate noticed her. One of them shouted sternly, "This is the Nameless Sword sect. People who don't belong here cannot stay here. Hurry up and leave." Yun Chujio quickly said, "I'm here to enter the sect." The attitude of the disciple who spoke immediately softened. "Oh. Join the sect? Then who recommended you? Did you bring a recommendation letter?" Chapter 3704 The Road to Heaven. Well, I wasn't recommended by someone else. Yun Chujio laughed dryly. You weren't recommended by someone else? Then you're a relative of an elder in our sect? Or are you someone's wife and concubine? When the disciple said the last sentence, there was a hint of gossip in his eyes. Yun Chujio was silent for a moment, and then she said word by word, "Neither. I want to challenge your sect's trial passage." What? You want to challenge the 9-to-1 life path to heaven? Are you crazy? The disciple exclaimed while looking at Yun Chujio as if she was a lunatic. The names of the trial passages of the 3 great sects and the 2 islands were different. The trial passage of the Nameless Sword sect was called the 9-to-1 life path to heaven. It was a 9-to-1 life path to heaven, and it was also the path to heaven. One could imagine how dangerous it was. Yun Chujio repeated again, "That's right, I want to challenge the 9 deaths, 1 life, and the road to heaven." Excuse me, where is the entrance of the 9 deaths, 1 life, and the road to heaven? As soon as Yun Chujio's words came out, the gatekeeping disciples all looked at her in disbelief. A little girl at the 9th level of the spirit transformation realm actually dared to boast shamelessly that she wanted to challenge the 9 deaths, 1 life, and the road to heaven? Either her brain wasn't working, or she was thinking too simply. One of the disciples who looked honest couldn't bear for Yun Chujio to die just like that. He said, "Little girl, this 9-to-1 life path to ascend to heaven isn't a joke. Not to mention the distant one, in the past 100 years, there was only one person who succeeded. Those who didn't pass all died inside. So, you should go back." Yun Chujio bowed to the disciple. "Thank you, big brother, but I have a reason to break in. Please tell me where the entrance is." The disciple who looked honest wanted to persuade her again, but the disciple who spoke first said harshly, "It's hard to persuade a damn ghost with words. Since she wants to die, then let her go." The honest-looking disciple had no choice but to stop talking after hearing that. He pointed at a cave beside the mountain gate that was covered in weeds and said, "Do you see that? Behind the weeds is the entrance of the road to heaven. Little girl, it's not too late for you to go back on your words. Once you enter the road to heaven, there's no turning back. You have to think twice." Yun Chujio thanked the disciple sincerely and then walked to the cave that was already covered in weeds. Yun Chujio could tell that the disciple was telling the truth when she saw the weeds. The weeds had grown so luxuriously, it must have been a long time since anyone had entered. She took a deep breath, then pushed aside the dense weeds and walked in. The disciple who spoke harshly shook his head, "TSK, this little girl is not bad looking, but her brain is not very good. She is dead for sure." The disciple who faced the loyal disciple sighed. He also felt that Yun Chujio basically could not survive. He said hesitantly, "Do we need to report this matter to the higher-ups?" "Report what? That little girl definitely can't pass, so why bother looking for trouble? When the time comes, they will be asking all sorts of questions, so I can't be bothered to get into trouble. Mu Jiang, you are not allowed to go either, do you hear me?" That loyal disciple, that was Mu Jiang, helplessly nodded his head. Actually, it didn't matter whether she reported it or not, because that little girl simply couldn't pass. Not to mention that she was only at the 9th level of the spirit transformation realm, even the 9th level of spiritual connection realm might not be able to pass. Therefore, the moment she entered the cave, there was basically no hope of survival. Chapter 3705 was not as simple as she had imagined. Yun Chujo had initially thought that entering the cave would mean entering the 9-to-1 life heavenly path. She had not expected that after entering the cave for a short while, her vision would suddenly brighten. There was actually another world inside. There was a rippling barrier in front of Yun Chujo. She could vaguely see that there were stone steps that went up one step at a time. It was estimated that only entering this barrier would be the true 9-to-1 life heavenly path. Yun Chujo was just about to enter when the kitten's humming voice came from her spiritual sense. "Master, this slim chance of survival is too dangerous. You'd better think of another way." Yun Chujo sneered in her heart. She knew why the kitten wanted to stop her. It was just afraid that after she died in here, it wouldn't be able to get out. Although Yun Chujo thought so in her heart, she said to the kitten, "Now there's no other way. I can only try. But if I really die, it'll really let you guys down. After all, you guys will probably be trapped in there forever." Yun Chuji's words were like a knife stabbing the kitten's heart. The kitten said a few words that went against its heart, such as, "share life and death," and, "die without complaint," and it felt like it was cursing a dog in its heart. Fuck, if this little girl really died in this narrow escape, would it be considered as digging a hole to bury itself? Yun Chujo took a deep breath and stepped into the ripples. The scenery in front of her instantly turned into countless stone steps. Yun Chujo had already participated in countless tests of all sizes, so she was no longer familiar with the path of the steps. She calculated in her heart that this step was nothing more than a test of a person's willpower. She could just climb up. However, things were not what she had expected. After climbing up for a while, she turned around and found that all the stairs had disappeared except for the one under her feet. What was below her was a bottomless abyss. If an ordinary person saw such a situation, they would definitely be shocked. They might even fall down from the stairs directly. Once they fell down, they would most likely lose their lives. Hei Shinjo, on the other hand, clicked her tongue in wonder with great interest. "Yo, this is interesting. This design is not bad. If I can learn this array, will I be able to build a pavilion in the sky in the future? Just thinking about it makes me feel awesome." The kitten in the spiritual beast bag was so angry that it almost cried. What time was it now? This stupid girl was still thinking about such nonsense. It's over, it's over. This time, it must have really backfired. I'm afraid I'm going to die in here. In order to test whether the steps below were really gone, Hei Shinjo took out a rolling pin and poked at the bottom. When she realized that there was really nothing, she became even more interested in this array formation. Therefore, every step this guy took, he would look back. As expected, all the steps he had taken had disappeared. The guy was playing as he walked, skipping forward. The guy muttered to himself, "That's weird. Is the stone steps just a test of one's courage? Isn't it too much of a waste of talent? How can such a thing be called a narrow escape?" While the guy was mumbling, the steps in front of him started to disappear every now and then. In other words, Hei Shinjo had to jump to get there. This guy was originally jumping, so he did not care about it at all. He continued to jump lightly. It had to be said that only this guy could remain calm at this moment. If it was anyone else, they would have to overcome their fear with every jump, because once they stepped on air, they would fall down. There was also a ban on flying here. Once they fell down, there was a high chance that they would die. Chapter 3706, The Missing Stone Steps. The gap on the stone steps became bigger and bigger. At first, Yun Chujo could jump over it without using her spiritual power, but later on, she could only reach the nearest stone steps with the help of her spiritual power. Yun Chuji's originally relaxed expression also became serious. Fortunately, although her spiritual power was not high, her movements were light enough. Otherwise, she would have fallen into the abyss long ago. However, when she saw the 1000 zhang gap in front of her, she was so angry that she almost swore. Was this a freaking test? Was this a test bird? How could a person jump so far? It would be fine if there was a borrowing point in the middle, but there was no borrowing point in the middle, so how could she jump over? Just as Yun Chujo was thinking about how to jump over, the steps under her feet began to shake. It was obvious that she was going to disappear. Yun Chujo broke out in a cold sweat for the first time. Her brain was working quickly. What should she do? If she wanted to go over, she had to have a borrowing point in the middle. How could she have a borrowing point? The shaking of the stairs became more and more intense. Half of them had already disappeared. Only half of Yun Chujia's feet were on the stairs. Just before the stairs completely disappeared, Yun Chujo suddenly jumped forward. When she reached the middle, her body could not help but fall down. Yun Chujo raised her hand and a few sticky threads attached themselves to the opposite stairs. Yun Chujo used the force to climb to the top of the stairs. Before she could let out a sigh of relief, the stairs began to shake. Yun Chujo could only jump up again. Fortunately, this time the distance was not too far. Following that, Yun Chujo used the sticky threads to jump continuously on the stairs that were getting larger and larger. This guy was so tired that he was panting heavily. She finally understood why many people died in this place. It was really freaky. If she did not have the sticky silk, she would have fallen down by now. However, even if she had the sticky silk, the prospects were not very optimistic. Because the stone steps seemed to have no end. Even with her freakish physical strength, she felt a little powerless. Moreover, she had to concentrate every moment and be tense at all times. It was really too difficult to endure. When she was jumping just now, Hei Shinjo was slightly distracted. If she had not thrown another sticky thread out of desperation, she might have already fallen down. It was not a good idea to continue like this. Sooner or later, she would be exhausted and fall down. Yun Chujo knew that the fastest way was to find the flaw in this array formation. That way, she would be able to easily pass this round. However, this fellow was not good at array formations. There was no way to break the array formation. This fellow stared at the stone steps surrounded by clouds and mist. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Huh? Surrounded by clouds and mist? Since these clouds could float in the air, could her little Wu Yun also do it? Thinking of this fellow summoned little Wu Yun. Of course, this fellow was afraid that the chicken would fly and the egg would be smashed. He tied a sticky thread on the little Wu Yun to prevent it from falling down. What made this fellow ecstatic was that the little Wu Yun was floating around in the air and there was nothing wrong with it. She tried to put one of her feet on it, but there was nothing unusual. Only then did she carefully put both of her feet on it, there was still no problem at all. This fellow's heart was instantly filled with joy. Ha, awesome! When this formation was designed, in order to increase the mysterious effect, it deliberately set up the clouds and mist. It was simply designed specifically for her. Originally, this fellow had been planning to fly up on the little Wu Yun. However, she discovered that only when her feet stepped on the steps would the steps above appear. Thus, this fellow could only treat the little Wu Yun as a ferry boat, shuttling between the steps continuously. Chapter 3707, The Supreme Immortal Palace. Hei Shinjo did not forget to eat and drink to replenish her strength when she was riding the little Wu Yun ferry. This fellow felt that this little Wu Yun was really worth it. This fellow silently made up his mind. When Wu Yun attacked her again, he would at least catch a few more little Wu Yun. After another half a day, they finally reached the end of the stairs. Yun Chujo kept the little dark clouds and blinked her eyes as she looked at the scene in front of her. Was this the immortal palace? Amidst the clouds and mist, there was a beautiful palace. Even the most picky person would be impressed by the beauty of this palace. In the sky above the palace, there were still snow-white cranes circling in the sky. All kinds of strange flowers and plants were blooming, and there was even a pleasant immortal sound. Hei Shinjo looked around. The stairs and the cliff behind her had disappeared. She had no other choice but to enter the magnificent palace. As soon as Yun Chujo pushed open the palace door, she heard an orderly greeting. Welcome, fairy. You are the master of the supreme immortal palace from now on. Your servants will do whatever you ask. Yun Chujo focused her eyes and saw dozens of beautiful palace maids and handsome guards kneeling on the ground, waiting for her orders with an extremely pious attitude. If it were an ordinary person, they would definitely be elated when they saw such a scene. After all, they had never enjoyed such a scene of stars supporting the moon before. In particular, these palace maids were all very beautiful, and the guards were all very handsome. It was inevitable that some people would be shaken, and they might even forget who they were for a moment. However, He Shinjo was different. This fellow was the ancestor and the female emperor. He had done things that were more impressive than this, so naturally, he did not take these so-called dazzling and charming eyes seriously. Not to mention, those handsome guards were like puppets wearing painted skin, they were just superficial. Cough cough, they were far inferior to her pretty boy. Therefore, He Shinjo waved her hand calmly. Get up. I'm hungry. Roast that flying crane for me and have a taste. The palace maid, the guard, in the past tens of thousands of years, countless people had challenged the trial, but this was the first time that someone wanted to eat a crane. Was this the reincarnation of a starving ghost? Palace master, there are many delicacies in the supreme immortal palace. The meat of this crane is actually not very delicious, a palace maid said with a stiff face. He Xinjia's small face darkened immediately. How dare you? Are you the palace master or am I the palace master? If I tell you to go and catch it, then hurry up and catch it. If you continue to talk nonsense, I'll grill you. The palace maid was so scared that she shivered and didn't dare to say anything more. She quickly took her people to catch the crane. He Shinjo looked at the blooming flowers and plants and said to the remaining palace maids and guards, what's the use of raising these broken flowers that only look good? Pull them all out. Palace master, if you pull them out, they will become bald. No, it's not very beautiful, is it? A palace maid braced herself and said. Are you stupid? After you pluck the flowers and plants, can't you grow some cabbage and radishes? By the way, grow some spiritual potatoes, which can be used to stew the crane meat. Although the palace maids and guards were mad, they didn't dare to object. They went to pluck the flowers and plant the spiritual potatoes with stiff faces. He Shinjo walked into the immortal palace accompanied by 2 palace maids. The interior of the immortal palace was extremely luxurious. Every detail was filled with immortal chi. Even He Shinjo, who was heartless, felt that it was not bad to be able to stay here for a few days. Chapter 3708, The Immortal Palace was even more beautiful. He Shinjo thought to herself that the Supreme Immortal Palace was probably a place to wear down one's will, making one feel so happy that one would not want to go back home. In the end, one would be trapped here and die. Of course, it was also possible that there was a killer move that could temporarily paralyze one and then deal a fatal blow. Regardless of which one it was, there should not be any danger at the moment. Hence, this fellow summoned Buttface. When the 2 palace maids saw Buttface, the corners of their eyes twitched involuntarily. What the hell was this? It seemed to be the most ordinary earth spirit dog that had grown up and eaten meat. He Shinjo said to them with a smile, this is my spiritual pet, Buttface. Isn't he very cute? The 2 palace maids nodded stiffly. He was somewhat cute, but what the hell was Buttface? He Shinjo didn't continue speaking. She simply washed up and fell asleep on the bed. Dog 2 dutifully lay by He Xinjia's bed and watched the 2 palace maids with half-closed eyes. The 2 palace maids were a little scared by Dog 2's stare. They were puzzled. It was just a puppy of a earth spirit dog. How could it make people feel so scared? After a good sleep, He Shinjo brought Buttface out of the bedroom. Immediately, someone served the food. As expected, the immortal crane was roasted. Moreover, they also made stewed crane meat, crane meatballs, and cold crane meat. It was an all-crane feast. Hei Shinjo complimented them with satisfaction and then picked up her chopsticks to eat. While eating, the guy said, as expected of the cranes raised in the immortal palace. The meat has an immortal aura. It's really delicious. By the way, how many cranes do we have in the palace? Reporting to the palace master, in order to correspond to the number of the cranes, there are 81 cranes in the palace. 81 cranes? Although it's a little less, it should be enough for me to eat. Catch them and kill them. Bring them over after they are cooked. Also, make their feathers into fans and cloaks for me. Make a few shuttlecocks. I'll keep them for fun. Yes. After eating, Hei Shinjo went outside and saw that the feathers of the cranes were falling from the sky. She also saw that the exotic flowers and plants had been replaced by cabbage and radish. The guy immediately asked the palace maid next to him with a smile, "Do you think that the immortal palace is more beautiful?" The palace maid replied with a stiff face, "Yes. It's all thanks to the palace master." Hei Shinjo blinked and said, "I still feel that there's something missing. By the way, we should raise a few red-feathered chickens so that they can have a lively atmosphere." Yes. Soon, a few red-feathered chickens were added to the immortal palace. But Face began to play with the chickens shamelessly. He was having a great time. Hei Shinjo was too ashamed to watch. She had raised a magnificent beast into a dog. It was a sin, a sin. The palace maids and guards looked at the immortal palace that was beyond recognition, and their hearts were filled with regret. Which of the challengers didn't covet the glory and wealth of this place after entering, and which of them didn't think that they had already reached the ultimate goal of life? They were extremely extravagant, demanding the best food and clothing, wishing that they could eat a few pieces of dried dragon and phoenix marrow to be satisfied, but this person had roasted all of their cranes. What was even more outrageous was that he had replaced all the exotic flowers and plants with cabbage and radishes. And he raised a flock of chickens? Is this a farm? Chapter 3709 Sword Dance. In the next 2 days, these palace maids and guards experienced what it meant to live a life worse than death. All of the palace maids and guards were forced to accompany the smelly girl to kick the shuttlecock. They were also forced to use all sorts of tricks to make them lose. The loser had to learn to bark like a dog. Moreover, they were forced to make Dog 2 the referee. Damn it, they couldn't live anymore. This was nothing. That smelly girl even placed a spiritual potato on top of their heads. Then, she practiced darts and archery. Every time she screamed, she would pretend that her hands were shaking and her legs were cramping. They were so scared that they almost peed their pants. But Face was having a great time. He felt that it was the best decision he had ever made in his life to rely on this little girl. If he had not been with this little girl, he would not have been able to build a real body. He would not have let a group of people bark like him. It was simply wonderful. The palace maids and the guards secretly gathered together and discussed, "We can't go on like this. I don't think anything happened to her in the end. She must have driven us crazy. It seems that we can only use the most effective method." Therefore, that night, when Hei Shinjo was about to rest, someone knocked on the door. After Hei Shinjo opened the door, she saw the most handsome guard standing at the door. "Palace master, your subordinate has prepared supper for you." Yun Chujo almost laughed out loud in her heart. Was he going to use the beauty trap? "Emma, please have some skill, okay?" This trick was obviously the little handmaiden's trick to seduce the male master, but it was actually used on the male guard. It was very incompatible, okay? However, this guy wanted to see how the show would go on, so he smiled and said, "Okay, I happen to be a little hungry." Hearing this, a trace of joy flashed in the eyes of the guard. He immediately went into the room, arranged the food, and even poured a glass of wine. "Palace master, although I'm not talented, I can still perform the sword dance. Why don't I help Palace master?" "Oh. You have such talent. Then dance. Let me see." Hei Shinjo said with a smile. The guard was even happier. He felt that Hei Shinjo had taken the bait. That's what he said. Wine, women, wealth, people always had a weakness. He didn't expect that this stupid girl's weakness was actually a handsome man. The guard took out his treasured sword and began to dance. It had to be said that it was indeed somewhat pleasing to the eye. Hei Shinjo picked up her chopsticks and ate as she watched the guard dance with relish. The guard saw Hei Zinji's focused gaze from the corner of his eye and felt more confident. After the sword dance, the guard was about to speak when he heard Hei Shinjo say, "Yes, it's very pleasing to the eye. I like it very much. Dance again." Yes. Although the guard was a little confused, it was understandable that he wanted to watch the dance for a while longer because the stinky girl was greedy for his sword skills. However, after the second dance, Hei Shinjo said faintly, "Continue, I want to watch again." Then, the guard started the third, fourth, and fifth dance. The next morning, the guard crawled out of the bedroom while vomiting blood. When the palace maids and guards saw this, they thought to themselves, "Oh my God. Isn't this little girl too fierce? She actually ruined people like this?" A guard came over and helped the guard up. With a gossipy expression, he asked, "You guys didn't torture her all night, right? This little girl is too fierce." The guard was so angry that he vomited another mouthful of blood. "Fierce my ass. She made me dance with the sword all night long. In the end, she even gave me a title, swordsman." Chapter 37:10, Go to the chicken coop and recite a poem, swordsman. Wouldn't that be mocking him for being a slut? The guards and palace maids couldn't help but laugh out loud. Seeing this, the guard spat out another mouthful of blood. He used his hand to pound the ground and said, "You don't have to laugh. I think we'd better let her pass this test quickly. Otherwise, if nothing happens to her, well, go crazy first." Everyone looked at the green vegetable fields in the distance and then looked at the clucking chickens. For a moment, there was silence. After a long silence, one of the guards said indignantly, "You're also stupid enough to go up and dance with a sword. Girls like to have literary talent. Look at me. Tonight, I'll use my talent to conquer her." That night, the boastful guard also entered the bedroom with the excuse of delivering supper. Then, he began to show off his literary talent. "Palace master, this beautiful scenery is perfect for reciting poems. Why don't I compose a poem for you on the spot?" Yun Chujio glanced at him. "Are you very talented? Are you good at composing poems?" The guard replied hurriedly, "Yes. I'm better at composing poems, especially with beautiful women in front of me." As the guard spoke, he looked at Hei Shinjo lovingly. Hei Shinjo nodded. "I didn't expect the immortal palace to be so full of hidden talents. If only I had discovered you earlier." The guard was overjoyed. He had said that women liked talented men. How could a lowly sword-wielding technique compare to something as elegant as poetry? Just as the guard was thinking about it, he heard Hei Shinjo say faintly, "I heard that hens can lay more eggs when they hear people recite poetry. Go to the chicken coop and recite poetry. Stop when it's daybreak, or you'll be killed without mercy." The guard was stunned. "What? Ask him to recite poetry to the hens?" While he was stunned, Yun Chujio had already called the palace maids in, "Bring him to the chicken coop. Keep an eye on him. If he doesn't recite poetry to the hens, kill him." The two palace maids were also stunned. Recite poetry to the hens? The two of them did not dare to ask further and dragged the guard out to recite poetry to the hens. Yun Chujio curled her lips. With such a character, she still had the nerve to seduce her. She wanted to see what other tricks they had up their sleeves. That miserable scholar and guard had been reciting poetry and songs by the chicken coop for the entire night. In the morning, his voice was so hoarse that he could not speak. He simply felt that he was too ashamed to face anyone. This time, those palace maids and guards were dumbfounded. Neither literature nor martial arts could do it. Just what kind of man did that little girl like? Finally, the burly guard said arrogantly, "What a woman likes is naturally a man who gives her a sense of security." The two of them look like little chicks. Naturally, they would not be able to get the favor of that stinky girl. Tonight, I'll give it a try. I'll definitely make her submit to my manly charm. The crowd was skeptical, but there was no other way. They could only let the guard give it a try. That night, after the guard entered Hei Xinjia's bedroom, he kept showing off his muscles. Finally, he got what he wanted and saw the girl's ecstatic eyes. The guard was ecstatic. It seemed that he would be able to take down this smelly girl soon. "Your figure is very good. Is your stamina also very good?" Hei Xinjiu asked with her chin in her hand. "Palace Master, your subordinate's stamina has always been good. I will definitely satisfy you." The guard was overjoyed in his heart. He was about to succeed. Chapter 37:11 Begged you to leave this place, since you have good stamina. How about this? Those cabbages and radishes have matured. Go get them and plant them again. In addition, Buttface is tired of chasing chickens. From tomorrow onwards, let Buttface chase you. Hei Xinjiu said faintly. The guard, this was different from what he had imagined. Shouldn't it be a moment of love? Why did it become a coolie? Also, when that Buttface didn't stop for a moment, if he was allowed to play with him, wouldn't he vomit blood from exhaustion? It was over, there was no way out. The guards returned in defeat. Just as they were debating whether they should let Hei Xinjiu pass this stage, the palace maids started fighting with the guards. This was because the palace maids' undergarments had been missing for the past 2 days. Occasionally, they would find that someone was spying on them. Just when they were at a loss, Buttface came out from the residence of a few guards with a few colorful items in his mouth. It was the missing undergarments of the palace maids. The palace maids couldn't take it anymore. Immediately, the guards and the palace maids started fighting fiercely. Hei Xinjiu sat in the courtyard and watched the fun while basking in the sun. She gave a thumbs up to Meng Yanshou in her heart. Although this pervert was a little wretched, his ability to peep and steal things wasn't bad. Hei Xinjiu narrowed her eyes and looked at the palace maids and guards who were fighting fiercely. She was giving them a taste of their own medicine. Wasn't she trying to cause trouble? Then let them have it. After the palace maids and guards fought with each other, they finally realized that something was wrong. When they saw Hei Xinjia's leisurely look, they understood that this must be the work of this bitch. They had been fooled. The palace maids and guards gnashed their teeth in hatred. However, due to the limitations of the array, they could not hurt Hei Xinjiu. They could only clench their teeth and say to Hei Xinjiu, "Palace Master, you can follow me to the next training ground." Hei Xinjiu crossed her legs and said with a smile, "What do you mean by the next training ground? I think the Supreme Immortal Palace is quite nice. I've decided to stay here for a long time. In a while, we will play blindfolded darts. This time, I promise that I won't miss or hurt you." The palace maids and guards were about to cry. For tens of thousands of years, it was the first time that someone refused to leave despite knowing that this was only a trial. It was really killing them. "Palace Master, no, little fairy, this place is formed by arrays. We are not human either. If you stay here for too long, you will die in this place. You should leave. What's there to be afraid of when the array is formed? It's fine. As the saying goes, you don't care about the world forever, you only care about what you once had. Before you die, you can be happy. I think it's pretty good." The palace maids and guards really cried this time. What did she mean by "it's easy to invite a god, but difficult to send a god away"? They were the ones. This smelly girl was relying on them. They had already said so much, but she was actually unwilling to leave. Was she planning to torture them all the time? Just as everyone was feeling hopeless, they heard the little girl say with a smile, actually, it's not impossible for me to leave. You all know that my spiritual power is terrible, so if I go out now, I'll be sending myself to my death. If you have a way for me to pass the remaining checkpoints, or if you can provide me with some useful information, I can consider leaving this place. Otherwise, I won't leave. The palace maids and guards looked at each other. It turned out that this stinky girl had such an idea. She was too cunning. Chapter 37:12, The third stage. The palace maids and the guards exchanged glances. Just as they were about to tell Hei Shinjo some fake news, they heard Hei Shinjo say casually, I don't have any other abilities, but I can tell who is lying with one look. If any of you are lying, I will definitely make your life a living hell. When Hei Shinjo said that, her aura suddenly turned cold as if she was a completely different person. The palace maids and guards could not help but shiver. Although they were created by arrays, human beings had a lot of emotions, too. Naturally, they were scared. Therefore, they could not help but feel scared after being threatened by Hei Shinjo. Yun Chujo glanced at them and said, I'll give you 15 minutes to consider. If you can't provide any useful information, I won't leave. But Face, who was standing beside Yun Chujo, barked, woof, woof, woof. When the palace maids and guards saw Butt Face, they immediately recalled many bad memories and agreed to Yun Chujia's request. Little fairy, we are only created by the array formation. Our knowledge is limited. We only know that there will be many demon beasts in the next stage. If you keep killing randomly, you will die of exhaustion even if you are not eaten by those demon beasts. However, if you can kill one of the red-horned flood dragons, you will directly pass the third stage. Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes and looked at the palace maid who spoke, and then looked at the reactions of the others. She felt that she was not lying, so she said lazily, all right, in that case, bring me to the next stage. Oh, right, before I leave, I'll give you a free reminder. Next time you hook up with a woman, I'll have to trouble you to grow your brains. The methods you use are terrible. Besides, you guys are unmarried and unmarried. If you have nothing to do, just practice. Maybe one day when I come back for a walk, Butt Face won't have to chase the chickens anymore. He can chase away your little dolls directly. Everyone, oh God. Please don't let this wretched girl enter the battlefield again. This isn't torturing her. This is torturing them. She's simply not human. She's a demon. Hei Shinjo reluctantly looked at the supreme farm that she had built. Then, she followed the palace maid and turned into a corner door. A white light flashed in front of her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she was already in a valley. Before she could take a look at her surroundings, she felt an evil wind coming from behind her. She quickly jumped to the side and took a closer look, only to see that it was a giant bear that had ambushed her. The demonic beasts in the 9-to-1 life path were all based on the demonic beasts from tens of thousands of years ago. Therefore, Hei Shinjo did not know the demonic beast in front of her at all, let alone its level. She did not know it, but Butt Face did. Hiding behind Hei Shinjo, the guy shouted, Little fairy, this is a level 60 upper violent bear. Although it is 5 or 6 levels higher than you, you are full of evil tricks. You can kill it for sure. Do your best. I have high hopes for you. Hei Shinjo snorted coldly. Butt Face, since you have a physical body, you have not shown your ability. Now that the opportunity is right in front of you, don't miss it. You go. Butt Face blinked guiltily. Little fairy, I've used my spiritual power to create a body, so I don't have any ability at the moment. Yun Chujo had expected this, so she was not surprised. She was already used to it. Her spiritual pets were all swindlers. Their names and origins were all high and mighty. If they really fought, they were nothing. Chapter 37:13 Cat Cub, You Go. When the violent bear saw that Yun Chujo was so engrossed in talking to the dog cub behind her that it completely ignored it, a cunning glint flashed across its eyes as it suddenly pounced towards He Shinjo. It thought that this attack would definitely succeed. Even if it could not bite the little human girl's throat, it could still use its huge body to crush her to death. However, just as it was about to pounce to the girl's side, a kitchen knife appeared in the girl's hand. The kitchen knife went straight for its neck. Violent Bear Shang Yuan had never seen such a reckless fighting style. It was so scared that it turned around and its huge body fell to the ground. Yun Chujo did not continue to cut him. Instead, she jumped to the side and continued to talk to Buttface. Buttface, you know that I never raise freeloaders. You have to be useful. Otherwise, why would I raise you? Buttface raised his head and said shamelessly, Little fairy, I know how to act cute. Don't you think that I'm very cute? Don't you think that ever since you have me, the smile on your face has increased a lot? Yun Chujo, she finally knew what the advantage of this idiot was, he was shameless. Buttface added, Little fairy, although I'm useless now, I'm different from the kittens. They are young beasts, and it will take a long time for them to become powerful. But I'm different. Although my body is young, my soul is mature. Therefore, I will become very powerful very soon. At that time, you will definitely feel that everything is worth it. Yun Chujo snorted coldly and ignored it. In fact, she had already collected it. Even if it was trash, she could only keep it. How could she throw it away? However, when it came to the kitten, Yun Chujo had an idea. She summoned the kitten and threw it on the ground. She pointed at the violent bear and said to the kitten, Kitten, I'll leave this little bear to you. The kitten, fuck. Fuck, what kind of joke was this? Didn't this wretched girl always treat her pets very well? Why did she let it deal with a level 60 violent upper origin bear alone now? Wasn't this sending it to its death? Or could it be that she had seen through some flaw? Just as the kitten was thinking about it, the violent upper origin bear pounced on it. The upper violent bear was also feeling very aggrieved, okay? It thought that it would be hit in one hit, but it didn't expect to be frightened by the little girl. It was a good opportunity to vent its anger on the fire-breathing cat. The kitten was furious when it saw the upper violent bear pouncing on it. Was this stupid bear blind? Why didn't it attack the smelly girl and Buttface, but instead, it chose to attack it? The kitten didn't have time to think about it. It didn't care if it was exposed or not. Its body was like a ghost as it dodged the attack of Violent Bear Shang Yuan. When Violent Bear Shang Yuan saw that its attack didn't hit, its temper flared up. It didn't even care about He Shinjo and Buttface who were beside it. It focused all its attention on fighting with the kitten. At first, the kitten was afraid that it would be exposed, so it only used its nimble movements to dodge Violent Bear Shang Yuan's attack. However, this guy was not a good-tempered person. When his anger was aroused, he could not care less. His sharp claws grew out again and began to counterattack. When Dog 2 saw the claws of the kitten, its eyes lit up. It whispered to He Shinjo, Little fairy, that claw is a unique attack method of the white tiger. It seems that the kitten has been possessed by the white tiger. Chapter 37:14, Why did she feel like she had fallen into a pit? Yun Chujo heard Buttface's words and narrowed her eyes. She had long noticed that something was wrong with the kitten. However, she could not figure out what was going on for a while. If it was said that the white tiger had possessed her, then why was the spiritual sense that the kitten had contracted with her acting as usual? Moreover, there was no problem in using the spiritual sense to communicate with the kitten. Yun Chujo really could not understand it. Before she had absolute confidence, Yun Chujo temporarily did not plan to expose the kitten because she was afraid that the white tiger would kill the real kitten. Just as Yun Chujo was thinking about it, the violent upper origin bear had been forced back by the kitten. It could only parry and had no strength to fight back. Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes and jumped behind the violent upper origin bear. She began to join forces with the kittens to deal with it. Very soon, the violent upper origin bear was beaten until it collapsed on the ground. Hei Shinjo liked to deal with demonic beasts the most because she could establish a temporary contract with them. Therefore, the miserable violent upper origin bear quickly became Hei Xinjia's contract beast. Hei Shinjo did not immediately pay attention to the depressed violent bear. Instead, she smiled at the kitten and said, "Kitten, why did you suddenly become so powerful?" A trace of guilt flashed in the kitten's lowered eyes. Just when it did not know how to explain, it heard Hei Shinjo say, "Ah, I know. It must be the Pishio bloodline awakening, right? I knew you would become powerful sooner or later. That's great. Come, Master will reward you with 2 dried fish." The kitten heaved a sigh of relief, HMPH. Stupid human. He actually took the initiative to find an excuse for it, which saved it the trouble. But, why did he reward it with 2 damn dried fish? Now, the moment it smelled this, it wanted to vomit. How could there be such a disgusting thing? Although the kitten despised the dried fish, under Yun Chujia's eager gaze, it still wolfed down the 2 dried fish. It was 80% likely that it had eaten too much, and it had not gotten stuck on the fish bones recently. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Yun Chuzhou then looked at violent bear Shang Yuan, who was playing dead. I won't say anything else. Since you're my beast now, you can only listen to me. Otherwise, I'll kill you. Where's the dragon with the red horn on its head? Lead me to it. Upon hearing Yun Chujia's words, violent bear Shang Yuan did not bother to play dead anymore. It glared at the red dragon and roared, "What? You're going to look for the red dragon, Shang Yuan? You'd better kill me now." Yun Chuzhou could not help but laugh when she heard violent bear Shang Yuan's words. She held the large kitchen knife and walked in front of it, saying, "All right, since you want to die so badly, I'll cut off your nose first, and then your ears." Violent bear Shang Yuan was so scared that he was trembling. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's not that I don't want to bring you there, but that upper Yuan red dragon is a level 63 demonic beast. If you go there, you'll be courting death." Level 63. Yun Chuzhou was also shocked. Level 63 meant that it was even higher than level 9 spiritual link. Seeing the fear on Yun Chujia's face, Violent Bear immediately let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that this little girl had to retreat after knowing the difficulty. Unexpectedly, he heard the little girl say, "Let alone level 63, even if it's level 100, you have to lead me there today. Otherwise, HMPH." Wild Bear Shang Yuan had no choice but to lead Hei Shinjo to find Red Dragon Shang Yuan with a face full of death. After walking for a short while, they met a Wild Lion Shang Yuan who was also level 60. Wild Bear Shang Yuan accepted his fate and fought with the Wild Lion Shang Yuan. Hei Shinjo said to Kitten lazily, "Kitten, since you're so powerful now, don't hide it. Go. Master has high hopes for you. When you win, Master will feed you 2 dried fish." Kitten, why did it feel like it had fallen into a pit? Chapter 37:15 Sword Flash. Although the cat cub felt that something was wrong, it could only brace itself and fight. This fellow felt helpless in its heart. If it wasn't afraid of dying in this perilous situation, it wouldn't have bothered to make a move. That must be the case. Violent Bear and the cat cub joined forces and quickly beat up the violent lion until it was unable to retaliate. A certain Jiu then eagerly established a temporary contract with the violent lion. Hei Shinjo was very familiar with this kind of mode. 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 3, when she saw the red flood dragon Shang Yuan, there were already a bunch of demon beast underlings following behind him. The red flood dragon Shang Yuan widened his vertical pupils. He simply couldn't believe what he saw. Were these dregs going to rebel? Were these dregs crazy? Yun Chuzhou sized up the red flood dragon Shang Yuan. Ever since this guy met the little lecherous dragon, his aesthetic standards for snakes had immediately improved by a few levels. Therefore, she felt that this red flood dragon Shang Yuan was simply too ugly. Yun Chujo said with disdain, "Hey, how can you be so ugly? You are so ugly, yet you still have the courage to live. You are really brave. Do you want to die by yourself, or do you want my underlings to kill you?" The red horn on the upper Yuan Scarlet Flood Dragon's head was so angry that it turned black. This brat's words were too sarcastic. It hissed and spat out its tongue, pouncing towards Hei Shinjo. Hei Shinjo hurriedly dodged and allowed the demonic beasts behind her to swarm over. These demonic beasts had always been angered by this upper Yuan Red Jiao Dragon. Now that they had an opportunity to take revenge, they naturally would not be lenient. The two sides were entangled in a fight. Hei Shinjo stood at the side, eating melon seeds to watch the show. She was simply delighted. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. She did not know if there was a Qi Ling on the road to heaven. If there was a Qi Ling, she would probably faint from anger. His own beast was fighting with his own beast. It was simply too embarrassing. Although the upper Yuan Scarlet Flood Dragon was powerful, it could not withstand the attacks of so many demonic beasts. After an hour, it finally died unwillingly. At the moment when the upper Yuan Scarlet Flood Dragon died, the situation before Hei Xinjia's eyes also changed. They had arrived at the fourth stage. When Hei Shinjo saw the contents of the fourth stage, she felt that it was simply a question for free. In front of her was a dense poisonous miasma forest. Hei Shinjo passed the fourth stage effortlessly and then went to the fifth stage. When she reached the fifth stage, Hei Shinjo was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. Before she opened her eyes, several sword lights shot towards her. Fortunately, this guy had always been vigilant and had always activated his spiritual energy shield. That was how he had avoided the tragic end of being shot like a hedgehog. Hei Shinjo looked closely and found that she seemed to be in an endless tunnel. Countless sword lights were darting around like ghosts. The only thing that made her feel relieved was that although those sword lights were darting around, their attacking range was limited. In other words, these sword lights had a fixed attacking area. The further she went, the stronger the sword light's attacking power became. At this moment, Yun Chujo was at the entrance of the tunnel, so the attack power of the sword lights was not too strong. Hei Shinjo blinked her eyes. She could foresee that the attack power of the sword lights in the depths of the tunnel would be very strong. She would definitely not be able to withstand it with her spiritual energy shield. What should she do? The first thing that came to her mind was the chaotic sword intent. She did not know whether this thing was reliable or not. Why not give it a try? At worst, he could just return it. Chapter 37:16. Why did you break into the forbidden area? After making up her mind, Hei Shinjo took out a large kitchen knife and started to wave it, the chicken slaughtering sword technique. Soon, a circle of sword intent appeared around her, blocking all the sword lights. At first, Hei Shinjo was a little nervous, afraid that the sword intent of chaos was not reliable. She did not expect it to be surprisingly useful. She guessed that the purpose of this stage was to test the sword techniques of the challengers. After all, the Nameless Sword sect was famous for their sword techniques. Hei Shinjo walked to the end of the tunnel as if she was strolling in a garden. What appeared in front of her was a pitch-black door. This guy pushed lightly, and a dazzling light flashed. When she regained her sight, she found that she was in a courtyard. Although the courtyard was relatively clean, it was very desolate. It was obvious that no one had lived there for a long time. Hei Shinjo frowned. What was the sixth test for? Just as Hei Shinjo was looking around, the door of the courtyard was pushed open, and 3 disciples wearing the same clothes entered. The 3 of them were stunned when they saw Yun Chujo. How dare you? Don't you know that this is a forbidden area of the sect? Why did you break in? What are your motives? Yun Chujo saw that the clothes of those people were the same as the ones worn by the guards of the Nameless Sword sect. She could not help but twitch her lips. This formation is quite up to date. The transformed clothes are actually exactly the same as the current sect clothes. However, it is also possible that the nameless sword sect's sect clothes have not changed. They are really lazy. Hearing Yun Chujia's words, those people were stunned. Then, they berated, "What nonsense is this? Quickly come with us to the discipline hall to receive your punishment. Looking at your spiritual power, you're at most a handyman. You actually have the guts to break into a forbidden area. You're really tired of living." Hearing their words, Yun Chujio giggled. Discipline hall? The nameless sword sect isn't a temple. What discipline hall is this? I'm dying of laughter. The transformed clothing is too unreliable. Those people looked at each other. This little girl must be out of her mind, right? Or had she lost her mind? Those people obviously lost their patience. One of them with a hooked nose said, "Senior brother don't talk nonsense with her. I'll tie her up first and send her to the discipline hall for interrogation." Without waiting for senior brother to nod, the hooked nose walked straight to Yun Chujio. "Don't refuse the toast. Follow me to the discipline hall now." Hei Shinjo was not going to be taken away just like that. She sneered and said, "You make it sound so real. Do you think you can trick me with the name of the nameless sword sect? Dream on. I will kill you today." The hawk-nosed man's face turned ugly when he saw that Yun Chujio had the intention to kill him. He said, "You want to murder a fellow disciple? This is outrageous. I will teach you a lesson today." After saying that, the hooked nose reached out his hand and slapped at Yun Chujio. Although Yun Chujio was quite a distance away from the hooked nose, she could still feel the sharp wind from his palm. This guy's heart couldn't help but sink. This cultivator's spiritual power was quite high. While she was thinking, she dodged the attack of the hooked nose, and the two of them tangled together. The hooked nose originally thought that he could take Yun Chujio down easily when he saw that she was only at the 9th level of the spirit transformation realm. However, he didn't expect that he couldn't make any progress even after fighting for half an hour. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Especially when he caught a glimpse of disdain from the corner of his eye on the two fellow disciples behind him. He could not help but become angry out of humiliation. He summoned a treasure sword and stabbed it at Hei Shinjo. Chapter 37:17, You Are a Spy. Hei Shinjo saw Hawk-Nosed pulling out his sword and curled her lips. "You are a swordsman and you want to play with my sword? I'll kill you. Swordsman. Bitch." This time, not only Hawk-Nosed, but the two people standing behind him also looked gloomy because they were all swordsmen. Wasn't this equivalent to scolding them? Of course, Hei Shinjo didn't care about the three people who were created by the array formations. Even if their spiritual power was higher than hers, she had Dehua, she had the kittens, and she was full of bad ideas. Therefore, after she dodged the hawk-nosed man's sword, she looked at the direction of the wind, and threw a big sack at the hawk-nosed man. The hawk-nosed man's sword instantly cut a hole in the big sack, and the chili powder inside was blown away. The hook-nosed man was not prepared at all, and he was choked with tears and snot. The two people standing behind him were not any better, and they also sneezed continuously. Hei Shinjo naturally would not let go of this excellent opportunity, and struck several lightning bolts at the hook-nosed man. The tragic hook-nosed man was struck by the chili powder and lightning, and his body emitted the smell of barbecue, and he cried out in pain. Seeing this, the two people behind him quickly jumped over and blocked Yun Chujio's attack. However, the three of them were very surprised. "Senior brother," he shouted sternly, "are you a thunder spirit root? Our nameless sword sect doesn't have a thunder spirit root. Where did you come from?" Upon hearing this, Hei Shinjo was immediately furious. "You are the spy. Your whole family is a spy. You are obviously a person created by the array formation, yet you still boast shamelessly that I am a spy." Shameless. Hei Shinjo looked around as she spoke. Why did the 6th stage look so strange? Forget it. Let's leave this courtyard first. Hei Shinjo dodged the three of them while they were still washing their eyes with water. Then, She leaped toward the gate of the courtyard. The three people with the hooked nose noticed that Yun Chujo had escaped from the courtyard. They rubbed their eyes and chased after her. Stop! Stop! Stop her! She is a spy who sneaked into our sect. Yun Chujo naturally would not sit still and wait for her death. She left the courtyard and ran wildly. Only then did she realize that she seemed to be in a huge sect. In the distance, there were many peaks and many pavilions. This fellow could not help but sigh in his heart. The formation of this 9-to-1 life and death road to heaven was really powerful. It had actually transformed into such a huge sect. This guy deliberately chose some small roads to run. On the way, he also met some disciples who were also wearing the Nameless Sword sect's uniform. Those disciples didn't understand at first, so they didn't stop Yun Chujo. However, soon, the shouts of hawk-nosed people came from behind. Those disciples stepped forward to stop Yun Chujo. Yun Chujo simply put on her gas mask and threw out large sacks of chili noodles. These Nameless Sword sect disciples had never seen such a shameless move. For a moment, they didn't react. Many people were hit by the move. Hei Shinjo ran for a distance again. However, this move could be used once, but it wouldn't work if it was used again. Because those cultivators had already activated their spiritual energy shields, the chili was useless against them. Yun Chujo complained in her heart. She could establish a temporary contract when she met a demon beast, but there was nothing she could do when she met a cultivator. Seeing that the encirclement was shrinking, Hei Shinjo was so anxious that her forehead was covered in sweat. Just as she was about to release De Hua, she saw a few small birds flying in the sky and her eyes immediately lit up. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.